US President Donald Trump has announced a 25% tariff on all car and light truck imports into the country, saying the move would spur growth in the American economy.
Donald Trump has reignited global trade tensions by threatening to impose 50% tariffs on imports from the European Union.
We would have a mutually acceptable and mutually advantageous solution. We are two biggest trading partners in the world.
Donald Trump's new economic world order is taking shape as his so-called reciprocal tariffs on 60 countries.
It didn't start with missiles. It started with metal, with microchips, with tractors, with smartphones. This isn't a traditional war. It's a trade war. And the first shots fired in silence. Retaliation came fast, calculated, ruthless. And now 6 nations, once allies, now adversaries, have officially declared economic war on the United States. They didn't hold press conferences. They didn't wave flags. They weaponized tariffs, canceled billion-dollar contracts, froze trade talks, and turned global supply chains into battlegrounds. In this video, we break down the 6 countries that are hitting back against Trump's trade war. Countries that are no longer waiting for Washington to play fair. They're counterattacking, quietly, strategically, and in some cases, irreversibly. And one of them? You'll never believe how far it went. Before we begin, make sure to hit the like button. It helps us beat the YouTube algorithm. Now we begin with number 6, Germany.
United States President Trump and new German Chancellor Friedrich Merz are meeting in Washington this week. It's the first time the two leaders are meeting face-to-face.
What looked like diplomacy in 2024 quickly turned to defiance in 2025. When Trump's administration expanded auto tariffs on European vehicles, Germany's industrial core, Volkswagen, BMW, Mercedes, faced direct financial assault. But Berlin didn't blink. In May 2025, Germany spearheaded a European Union retaliation package targeting over $40 billion worth of U.S. goods, from American whiskey to aircraft parts. But that wasn't the shocking part. Germany went further. It froze procurement contracts with American aerospace and defense firms, redirecting those billions to domestic suppliers and even Chinese partners. A subtle but devastating shift. Behind closed doors, German officials called it economic containment, and U.S. exporters, they're already feeling the freeze. Before we continue, make sure to hit the subscribe button to show you support. Now we continue with number 5. Mexico.
Those 25% tariffs that the president slapped on Canada and Mexico on Monday.
After 4 years of trade tension, Mexico has had enough. When Trump revived his Made in America or Pay the Price doctrine, Mexico's automotive exports were hit with a fresh round of 25% border tariffs. The result? Mexico struck back, not with threats, but with policy. It suspended rare earth mineral exports used in U.S. EV batteries, imposed new licensing rules on U.S. agricultural imports, and then quietly began negotiating long-term trade deals with China and Brazil, effectively replacing the United States in key sectors. And the blow that stunned Washington? Mexico announced incentives for U.S. companies to relocate within Mexico, offering tax breaks and expedited permits to Ford, GM, and even Caterpillar. They're not just retaliating, they're recruiting America's own economy. Coming in at number 4, Japan.
Japan's top tariff negotiator has arrived in Washington to meet his U.S. counterpart for a second round of talks.
When Trump's tariffs extended to Japanese vehicles and electronics, Tokyo didn't shout, it strategized. Japan cut corporate tax rates for foreign automakers, pivoted trade toward the EU and ASEAN, and most notably, redirected $12 billion in semiconductor investments away from the U.S. to the Netherlands and Singapore. But it was one move in April 2025 that made headlines. Japan canceled its $1.5 billion F-35 maintenance contract with Lockheed Martin and opened talks with South Korea and France to build its own fighter upgrade program. A direct hit to American defense dominance. They didn't call it retaliation, but the world noticed. Number 3, India.
Is Donald Trump now gunning for the pharma and electronics in the fresh trade threat? Donald Trump is turning the heat back on the trade issue now. In a fresh move, he has signaled there could be a special tariff.
The tension began when the U.S. imposed heavy tariffs on Indian pharmaceuticals and IT services under Trump's reciprocal trade fairness push. New Delhi's response? Ruthless. India hit back with retaliatory duties on U.S. medical devices and agricultural products, suspended talks on a joint digital trade agreement, and then dropped the hammer. A ban on American cloud data storage providers from operating government contracts. Amazon Web Services, locked out. Microsoft Azure, replaced. And in a twist no one expected, India signed a landmark tech-sharing agreement with China's Huawei, a move that shocked Washington and signaled a seismic geopolitical shift. Now, number 2, China.
All right, President Trump makes fresh comments. Of course, Sarah mentioned it this morning, reportedly on stalled talks with China, arguing the country has, quote, totally violated its agreement.
Trump reignited the U.S.-China tech war the moment he returned to office. He expanded chip export bans, blacklisted Chinese AI firms, and pushed Europe to follow. But China was ready. It retaliated with surgical tariffs on Boeing aircraft, NVIDIA chipsets, and rare earths. Then it went further, banning key components to U.S. defense contractors and launching a national semiconductor fund worth $300 billion to break free from U.S. tech. In June 2025, China dropped its final card, a blockade of strategic metals exports, germanium, gallium, and scandium. Without them, American clean energy and defense supply chains falter. China isn't just retaliating, it's trying to outlast the United States in a war of attrition. And now, number 1, Canada.
Well, we begin with breaking news from the White House. U.S. President Donald Trump is threatening to increase tariffs on Canada again.
The ally nobody thought would turn. The neighbor the U.S. always assumed was permanent, predictable, loyal. But in 2025, Canada did the unthinkable. It began with steel, then lumber, then autos, and finally, food. In the first 6 months of Trump's renewed tariff campaign, the U.S. slapped over $18 billion in duties on Canadian exports. From Quebec's aluminum smelters to Saskatchewan's grain shipments, Canadian industries were bleeding, quietly, constantly. And then Ottawa snapped. Under the leadership of Prime Minister Mark Carney, Canada unveiled the largest counter-tariff package in its modern history, over $22 billion in retaliatory duties across a precise map of U.S. states, targeting industries, jobs, and political strongholds. Tennessee's whiskey exports, taxed. Michigan's auto parts, blocked. Wisconsin dairy, tariffed into oblivion. But this wasn't just trade. Canada went deeper. It suspended all joint military procurement involving U.S. contractors, including long-standing defense partnerships with Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, and Raytheon. Ongoing contracts were halted. New bids? Frozen. That alone sent shockwaves through Capitol Hill. But Ottawa wasn't finished. Behind closed doors, Canadian officials began renegotiating pipeline and energy infrastructure deals with the European Union, deliberately bypassing U.S. multinationals. A new export terminal on the Atlantic coast was fast-tracked, with German financing. LNG that once flowed to the U.S. Midwest was being rerouted to Europe. Even more disruptive, Canada passed the Digital Sovereignty Act in April 2025, a sweeping tech policy requiring that all data from Canadian citizens be stored on domestic servers. That single law instantly blocked Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, and Microsoft Azure from public sector contracts. And for the first time in history, Ottawa issued a formal warning to Canadian companies: reduce exposure to U.S. supply chains, especially in agriculture, aerospace, and pharmaceuticals. The betrayal was not emotional. It was economic, strategic, permanent. Washington didn't see it coming. It thought Canada was a buffer, a given. But the new reality is far more brutal. Canada is decoupling. Even more astonishing, Canada is actively lobbying for a transatlantic anti-tariff compact, a trade and investment alliance with France, Germany, the Netherlands, and Ireland. And the United States has been explicitly excluded. One Canadian official called it economic inoculation against American volatility. And in cities like Toronto, Calgary, and Vancouver, that message is resonating. Trade shows are no longer about U.S. partnerships. Tech incubators are looking to Europe. Agribusinesses are reorienting toward Asia. And the Canadian dollar? It's becoming a symbol of resistance. This isn't just retaliation, it's a redefinition of loyalty. So when we say that Canada, of all nations, has declared trade war on America, we don't mean it metaphorically. We mean it structurally, legally, financially, and with a cold resolve Washington never expected. Remember to smash that like and subscribe button for more awesome videos. Thank you so much for watching.